Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coin Bureau Clips. I have a special guest with me today. I am very lucky to have the opportunity to talk with the one and only Tiffany Fong. Now, Tiffany is, by her own admission, a reluctant crypto content creator. Very much found herself kind of in the midst of this crazy and wonderful industry of ours. And I have been wanting to talk to her for ages to get her perspective on a whole load of things. Crypto, obviously, Celsius and Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX and so many other things. So, Tiffany, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm honored to be here. You're a legend in this space. And I
Oh,
said this to you in DMs, but your SBF impression was excellent. I loved it.
I think it got kind of mixed reviews, but it was
Really?
as soon as the wig went on, it was sort of like, this is
I think
okay.
it was great. It made me laugh. So excellent job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I used to do sort of stuff like that quite a lot at the beginning of videos, for the sort of not financial advice disclaimer, but we found it was kind of taking up quite a lot of creative bandwidth and stuff like that. So I kind of phased it out a little bit. But I saw the wig in a costume shop in London
You
when
have
I was
to.
there over Christmas, and I just thought, I've got to make this happen.
It was a great idea. You did a great job. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure, a pleasure. Thanks for joining. So Tiffany, like before we kind of get into the weeds of everything that's been going on recently and get your perspective on things, can you sort of tell us firstly, how you got into crypto and how you came to be this reluctant crypto content creator?
I feel like I fell into all of this sort of by accident because one of my relatives was Bitcoin mining back when I was in high school. So he gave me my first Bitcoin as a gift back when I was in high school in 2011, and I had no idea what it was. I had no clue, which is part of why I've been able to diamond hand through the multiple ups and downs in bull and bear markets, all the way up until I decided to put a few of my Bitcoins and several ETH into Celsius Network. So I didn't actually discover crypto on my own. I kind of luckily got some crypto very young, held on because I wasn't paying attention, and stupidly put it into a centralized platform. And now that platform has collapsed, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you say stupidly, but I mean, this is one of the things that I think has been so kind of, I guess, so kind of heartbreaking about the whole Celsius thing is that, hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? But so many people trusted Celsius, and I think the likes of Alex Majinsky and others did a really good job of kind of selling Celsius as a legit platform. So yeah, I
Lots
mean,
of
I don't think you can be too hard on yourself in that respect. And I mean, I remember watching, I think it was the first video you put out on your YouTube channel when you were
yes.
talking about this money that you had trapped in Celsius.
Mhm.
And I watched it again recently, and the thing that really struck me was like kind of all through it, you're clearly sort of quite emotional. You're struggling to keep it in check, and that really sort of hit back home to me, this whole saga. And I think it's easy to forget, like it's such a scandal and there's been so much talk, but it really reminded me how much it has affected people, emotionally as well as financially.
This is true. This is true. Yeah, I was sort of on the verge of tears and also laughing in that video just because I found it all so ridiculous and shocking that that had happened. But yeah, that's how I started, I guess, content creating because that was my first video ever on YouTube about 8 months ago when Celsius shut down withdrawals in June last year. So I just wanted to complain and whine about that somewhere because most of my in real life friends aren't in crypto and didn't know what was happening. So I put out that video where I was complaining that I left 3 Bitcoins and 11 ETH in Celsius.
Yeah. Did you find it did it help, like, making that video? Did it help to sort of have an outlet
I think it
for that
did because I feel
frustration?
like, yeah, because I didn't have anywhere to vent about it. None of my friends knew it was happening, but I didn't think anyone was going to watch that video because I had 0 subscribers at the time. But it seems that other people who had lost money were looking it up. So I feel like I found some commiseration in other people who had also lost money in Celsius. So it was nice to have sort of a community forming. And that's the only reason I continued making videos, because I knew other people out there were looking for answers as to what was happening, and as was I. So I just figured I'd keep it up and continue making videos about just updates on the bankruptcy. So that's how all of this started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild, and I mean, I think that's a great thing to be doing, because I think for people in your position, who have money stuck on Celsius still, and I mean, this thing, I don't know, when this is likely to be resolved, but I guess if you're in that position, you want to feel like you have some solidarity with other people. You want to be able to talk about it with people, because it must be a really traumatic experience to go through.
Totally. I did get a lot of nice messages from people who like said it made them feel less alone and everything like that. So that was good and that was nice. So I mean that's the only reason I even started any of this. But yeah, and then it sort of snowballed into more, because as I continued posting, employees inside of Celsius started sending me all this leaked information without me even soliciting it. So that was interesting. So I got a couple of the leaked audios, like their plans to reopen as Kelvin, and their plans for, wrapped IOU tokens, Alex Mashinsky's transaction history. I got a lot of information from inside the company that I just started to leak. So I guess I ended up in sort of a journalistic role without really meaning to, but it's been fun.
Yeah. It feels like you've been sort of hurled into the midst of the kind of crypto community,
Yes.
and at one of the wildest times in crypto's recent history. Because I mean, obviously, by the time Celsius collapsed, the bear market was in kind of full swing.
Hmm.
But I mean, for someone who's been in this industry for a few years now, I mean, this last year or so has been just insane.
It really
And I'm really curious to know, like, for someone like you who's sort of relatively new to it in that respect, as you
right.
say, your first video was kind of 8 months ago, although you've
Yeah.
actually, I mean, you've held crypto, you said, since 2011.
Since 2011, but I can't pretend that I was some expert, because I held that long mostly because I wasn't paying any attention to the markets. So I feel like I'm new. Like I'm lucky to have gotten in so early, but I feel like I'm new to the space in terms of like actually interacting or talking about it. So yeah,
Yeah. I think 2011, that still makes you an OG. I think
I guess
I mean,
so.
that is seriously early.
I mean,
It's
thank you
it's
to my
impressive.
relative. It's less my genius at a young age. It was more my relative, but thank you.
It's a fascinating thing, because I think, people still talk so much about what it must have been like to be in that early, and one of the things I always say to people is that, so many people who did get in that early, they would have sold at $100. They would have sold at, I mean, I've seen people who sold at $10.
Totally.
Um, so this idea that, there's a huge number of people who've diamond handed it all the way along
Yeah.
is kind of a misnomer, I think. But then, of course, people in your situation who sort of, as you say, didn't really know much about it. And I know a few people as well who sort of kind of forgot they had it.
Totally.
It's like, oh yeah, I
Totally.
bought some Bitcoins, and yeah, I kind of forgot all about them. And then I
And that
saw
worked out well
saw
for them
something.
and me. Like not paying attention
Yeah.
for years worked out very well before Celsius. I think that I started getting back into crypto and researching more. I think during the last bull market. I forget, was that 2019? I don't know. The last bull market where everyone was getting into NFTs. I think that's when I started paying attention again. And I bought a bunch of ETH around that time. So I'm down bad on ETH. But I've definitely run into a lot of your videos during that time when I started getting back into crypto.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that would have been kind of, yeah. So 2020, I think the bull
2020.
market
Okay,
kind of
yeah.
really, yeah. Because you
Mhm.
remember we had the pandemic lockdowns, and
Yes,
everything just
yes.
tumbled, and
Hmm.
then it was that really weird period, because I mean, we saw it firsthand at the channel, because we saw our growth kind of really go up, because there was this
Hmm.
phenomenon. Everyone was stuck at home,
Totally.
nothing to do.
Yes,
And suddenly, everyone who'd sort of gone, I'd really love to know more about crypto, but I just don't
yes.
have the time.
Yeah,
Suddenly they did. And it
yeah.
was just, yeah, it was crazy. And then that,
Very
I think,
true.
obviously the Bitcoin halving came up
Yes.
around that time. And
That
it
was a
was
wild
just, yeah,
time. I remember the euphoria.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's when I got back in too. So I'm one of everyone. But yeah.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, I remember looking at, I see quite a lot of data about, how long people have been in. And I mean, 2021, I think, was when, so I think the majority of people actually kind of heard about crypto for the first time. So
yeah,
yeah, but it sometimes feels like, it's sometimes it can, crypto, I think, has this weird thing of kind of distorting time a little bit because it's so, there seems to be just kind of, sometimes it just, the never ending kind of dramas or crisis. Like either prices are going wild and everyone's like really excited,
yeah.
or the industry is just in a
It's
state of
collapsing.
meltdown and everyone's just depressed.
Yeah, and I feel like now I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I've seen the euphoria, and now I'm seeing all of the collapses, and I'm front and center
Yeah.
for some reason.
And
uh,
can I ask, so you were at ETH Denver, was it the week before last?
yes.
What was the mood like there?
It was fun. I mean, no one seemed to be too upset about everything that's been happening with the collapses and everything like that. Um, I mostly just went and met people because I'm not actually working at a blockchain company, so I wasn't like really in the weeds of all the workshops and everything like that. But I just lingered. I
Yeah.
just hung around and met people. It was a good time. I recommend it.
I was at Bitcoin Miami last year, which was, yeah, again, like a really interesting time. And it's odd because I mean the crypto community exists so much online, and you get your sense of it kind of from crypto Twitter, which is a pretty adversarial place. But
Yeah,
then to kind of get in and amongst the crypto community in real life is a real experience. Like
that's true.
people are so passionate, people are so, I think, much more optimistic in real life as well, and
I think
that kind
so.
of bringing together really
And much
works.
nicer in real life because I mean, this was my first live crypto event that I've ever been to, so I can't really compare it to others. But I got recognized a couple times, which was interesting because I'm really new to this. But also, some people have come up and said that they've told me that they've written mean things to me online, but they were really nice and lovely to me in person. So I'm just like, most people aren't willing to say mean things to your face, only on Twitter.
Yeah, it's such a strange phenomenon, isn't it?
It's
I
weird.
that's weird. People would come up and actually admit to saying that online. It's
I think
almost like
someone even
it's
told
almost
me
like
that I
admitting
blocked
to a
them.
split personality.
Yeah, someone was like, "You blocked me because I commented a bunch of mean things on your tweets," and I was like, "Well, I was like, well, nice to meet you, I guess." So that
It's,
was interesting. It was an interesting experience.
yeah. What a insane, yeah, it's such a crazy space. But yeah, I have noticed, like, people occasionally come up to me at events or sometimes in the street, and like they're always so nice, and it's like
Yeah,
it's hard to square it with this kind of much more, I don't know, rabid sort
yeah.
of
Twitter's
online community.
scary. Yeah, honestly, like, because Twitter is such an echo chamber, and all like things become inflammatory so quickly. I was actually kind of scared to go to ETH Denver because I was like, are there going to be people just yelling at me like on Twitter? But yeah, everyone's nice and cordial in person.
I think the ETH community in general sort of a lot more chilled, I think.
Yeah, compared to what? I am gonna go to Bitcoin Miami for the first time this year. So, do you think that the
Okay.
people are nicer?
Yeah, I mean, I must say, like, everyone I met at Bitcoin Miami last year was like really lovely.
Yeah,
But I think Bitcoin is, can be a bit more sort of strident. I did overhear a few sort of arguments between kind of Bitcoiner, yeah, hardcore Bitcoiners, and
yeah.
then like people who dared to suggest like a liking for Ethereum or
Anything else?
any other
Oh
project,
yeah, I
and
got a
it
lot of
was
Bitcoin maxis like commenting mean things to me because I posted that I was going to ETH Denver, telling me that I was stupid and all of that. I'm like, I just want to go meet people. Like some people, it's very polarized. I don't know. Twitter.
yeah. Yeah, Twitter. Yeah, I mean, I think again, we're kind of in the crypto bubble, aren't we? And I guess Twitter is just like that. Whether it's crypto or anywhere else, people
Yeah,
just fall into their kind of tribes and
this is
just
true.
let in a lot of cases their worst selves kind of just run
It's
wild.
very
But
true. I mean, everyone hiding behind the screen, they say
yeah,
everything. Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
But no, you'll have a great time at Bitcoin Miami. It's yeah, and well, you'll have to tell me about it. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it this year, but
That's a bummer.
yeah, you'll have to let me know what
Keep
the
you
vibe
updated.
is, because yeah, last year's was interesting because I think everyone knew that we were sort of on the verge of a bear market. You know, the good times were going to kind of
Mm,
come to an end fairly
yeah.
soon, but there was still so much kind of optimism there, and you know, there were people doing deals. There was stuff being built. It's kind of fascinating. So
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be interesting to hear
I'll keep you
what the
posted.
atmosphere is like this year.
Yeah. I'll let you know.
So yeah, let's talk a bit more about Celsius then, because obviously this, as you say, this was your introduction to the scene,
It was.
um, and I mean, I remember the last kind of thing I checked up on was CoffeeZilla's brilliant video about it,
Mm,
and again, like you know, he was great with kind of focusing on people who'd been affected by it.
yeah.
But where are we kind of with the Celsius story at the moment? I mean, I gather a kind of restructuring this idea of Nova Wolves to try
Right.
and fix it all. Can you
Yeah.
sort of fill me in a bit on that?
I mean, Celsius had extended their exclusivity period multiple times to where they were the only people who were able to put out any sort of plan. And then they had bids happen, which they never posted the bids, but I actually did leak those bids. I don't know if you saw that, but I leaked the bids on Celsius's assets um, because
Oh, nice.
in a court hearing, Kirkland and Ellis stated that none of the bids were appealing, so they were going to move forward with their own plan. But I had been leaked the bids prior, but I had been sitting on them for a month or so. So when they stated that all of the bids were unappealing, I leaked the bids. So companies like Binance, Galaxy Digital, Nova Wolf was one of the bidders, had bid on the assets, and they ended up choosing Nova Wolf. I personally probably would have been fine with Binance buying out the assets so that we could all withdraw. But they ended up going
Mm,
with Nova Wolf as a plan sponsor. So um, it looks like they're giving holders with less than $5,000 in their account I think 70% recovery, and then they're giving larger account holders like me an undisclosed amount of crypto back, and the rest will be equity sort of tokens. So equity in their new company, which I'm not interested in. Like I don't want
mm.
equity in the new Celsius. So that's basically where we're
Yeah.
at now. It hasn't been finalized, so we're waiting to see what happens, but that's where it seems that things are heading right now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Undisclosed is not a
Yep.
word
They
that
say a
inspires confidence.
meaningful or a significant amount of crypto back, but I think that the estimates so far have been about like 20 to 30% of crypto back. So I'm not loving that plan.
No, no,
Um,
I don't blame you. And have they given any sort of timeline on that?
I believe it's March 31st that we're going to see more of a fully fleshed out plan. And then I guess we'll go from there and see what happens. But it's all just, it moves so slowly. Like it's been 8 months and we're finally seeing some sort of outline of a plan. Like it's been months since the shutdown. So, I mean, things have moved really slowly and they'll probably continue to move slowly, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, there's been talk at the moment, or there was talk quite recently about the Mount Gox bitcoins, which I mean,
Mm.
I think Mount Gox is now almost that collapse is now almost a decade ago.
Oh my God.
Um,
Jesus.
yeah, and
Yeah, Celsius. I hope it's wrapped up in the next few years. Hopefully, hopefully 1 or 2 years. I'm not sure. I'm assuming though that like I think FTX's bankruptcy will probably last way longer because FTX was just so much more convoluted and like it seems way worse, honestly, than Celsius. Like
yeah.
it's tough that something makes Celsius look sort of good, but the FTX collapse looks way more complex. So I feel like that bankruptcy I could see lasting like maybe a decade. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember we were sort of looking into it when they had that sort of first bankruptcy hearing, and kind of John Ray the third sort of came onto the stage, you know, this new character in this crazy kind of psychodrama, and
Hmm.
really got the impression that, like, you know, him and his team were sort of there in the Bahamas just going like, oh my,
Right?
what,
Yep.
what?
Worse than Enron. Worse than Enron. It's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
Oh my word. I mean, I guess for something like Celsius, I mean, to compare it to Mount Gox is perhaps a bit unhelpful, because I think they're very different entities. Obviously, Mount Gox was I think Mount Gox was always a complete mess,
Mm,
and obviously that bankruptcy involved theft over a long time. I mean,
yeah.
hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin kind of went missing over a long period of time. So I guess that's kind of complicated the whole process. So yeah, I think perhaps it's reasonable to expect that Celsius will there'll be some kind of resolution reached
Hope
on it,
so.
in the fullness of time. I don't think it'll necessarily take a
I
decade,
hope
but
so. I mean, the longer that any of the bankruptcies go, it's just going to be less recovery for customers, since it's just we're paying out lawyers millions of dollars every month. So it's rough. But
yeah,
we'll see. We'll see.
yeah, and
Hopefully
it's
we wrap it
it's
up.
the lawyers who are making out like bandits throughout
They're
this
really
whole.
winning in all this.
Yeah. Gosh. So okay. So yeah, Celsius is we're kind of hoping that we're going to see some sort of resolution. It's not going to be, by the look of it, a resolution that is going to be ideal, really,
Yeah.
for anyone, I guess.
Not going to make everyone happy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
But well, I guess some sort of resolution anyway would be a start.
this
So,
is true.
and of course, you're gonna keep us up to date with all that,
I
with
will
everything
try.
that's going on. So
I will try.
you will,
Yes, I will.
yeah, yeah.
Been making YouTube videos.
So
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way to do it. That
Yeah.
this is the new media. It was interesting listening, I think, to I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to CoffeeZilla on Joe Rogan.
Oh,
I
I've
think it
listened to
was.
part of it. I haven't finished it, but I need to.
Yeah. It's a really interesting conversation, because, they kind of touch on this idea of new media, which is what us YouTubers, if you want to use a collective term, which I'm
Mhm.
not particularly keen on, but it's this is the kind of business that we're in now. And when
Totally.
you look at the numbers that kind of legacy news networks get, in terms of eyeballs, in terms of people viewing, it really kind of, you do sort of start to realize, actually, YouTube is even more powerful a tool than you actually
Actually,
than you thought. People
I
are,
think so
you're
too.
getting a lot more eyeballs.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I there was a period where I was like sending some of my leaked information to big reputable publications. Like I leaked the first one with the New York Times, but I feel like there's so many obstacles in getting something out. Like to me, that was an audio where Alex Mashinsky was talking. To me, it was so clearly real because I could hear his voice and everything. But for them, they had to
Mhm.
like reach out to Celsius for comment, and it took such a long time to get it actually published that I since then have just been thinking I'll just put out everything out myself. Like I don't need to go through all these like hurdles just to have the stamp of
Yeah,
a publication. So I agree. I like YouTube and everything like that. Just posting it all
yeah.
ourselves.
Put it out there, and let the viewers be the judge. Let the viewers make their own mind up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think sometimes there's this idea that viewers have to be kind of led by the hand in order to arrive at a conclusion. It's like, no, put the information out there, and
Totally.
they will figure it out for themselves. They're intelligent people.
Agree. Agree.
Yeah,
Yes. Agree.
yeah. So I'm looking forward to, yeah, I'm gonna be keeping an eye on your channel, Tiffany, to keep up with what's going on with Celsius, and yeah,
Okay.
fingers crossed we get some sort of resolution, because
I hope so.
yeah, it must be a terrible situation to be in.
Yeah.
But moving on from Celsius, because you mentioned FTX, and
Yeah.
obviously, yeah, it's again, it felt like we were only just starting to process what had happened with Celsius, and obviously all the others, Voyager, and then there was Three Arrows Capital that went down. And just when it felt like we kind of got a handle on all that,
Yeah.
the we hit the mother load, and FTX and Alameda went to the wall.
Totally.
Um, and as you say, like, that is so complex. There was so much going on there. There's so much for the new FTX team to kind of dig through, and
Yeah.
it's anyone's guess as to when that will be resolved. But I mean, you've had kind of you've had a unique perspective on what's been going on with FTX, because you've been talking to Sam Bankman-Fried,
Yeah.
um, and obviously there was this fascinating period sort of after it, where Sam was kind of talking to lots of people, talking to news outlets and stuff. I can only imagine his lawyers just being
I
like,
know. I
please.
know. Even still, I'm like, how have they not just broken your phone? But yes, he did go on a media tour pretty soon after FTX had collapsed. Well, I think FTX collapsed on they filed for Chapter 11 on like November 11th. I reached out to him
Yeah.
that day just saying like, hey, like, would you be willing to chat with me? I'm thinking there's no way in hell this guy's going to get back to me. And then on the 16th, he got back to me, and that's when we had our first interview on the phone. So and then I think on the 29th was when he started the media blitz. So I got one of the first few conversations with him, which was interesting. And then now I'm still talking to him because he's now in house arrest in Palo Alto. So I've gone and visited him a couple times. So it's been interesting to see it
Yeah.
all firsthand.
I'm fascinated to know, and obviously, I appreciate, Tiffany. There's probably there's things you can say and things you probably can't say, but I'm really curious to know can you give us an insight into his kind of state of mind at the moment? He's sitting there, as you say, in Palo Alto at his parents' house. The trial, I think, is scheduled for October. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, October. Um,
Yeah.
He's certainly not doing too well right now. I mean, I spoke with him on Saturday, actually, so a couple of days ago. And it sounds like he's really just spent the past few days just kind of stewing over and spiraling about every little thing he wishes he'd done differently. And I mean, it might not be things that the public would be satisfied to hear about, but he was like voicing his regrets about not taking specific phone calls on specific dates, or like he was like, I should have taken a phone call with the Securities Commission of the Bahamas on November 8th. Like, things are very specific, but it seems like he spent the past several days just sort of spiraling about every little regret he's made, like he's had along the way. And a lot of those regrets revolve around not like him wishing he didn't file for Chapter 11 and him wishing he didn't pass things off to Solcrom, which I'm assuming most people would hate to hear, but those are some things that he's expressed that he regrets. So he's certainly not doing well mentally, and he's been a little depressed. I also think he's just pretty lonely right now in general. Like, obviously, many insiders have been turning on him, Caroline, Gary, and Nishad Singh recently. And we've spoken multiple times about the fact that all of his friends that he's had over the past few years were the people that he worked with at FTX. So now, obviously, most of them are not speaking to him or even turning against him. So he seems very lonely and isolated right now, which is why I think he's pretty willing to chat with me when I've reached out. But I know he's not talking to that many people, but I think he does appreciate the fact that I'm open to talking to him and everything like that. But lonely, stewing over his regrets, and I don't know. Let's see what else is his bail conditions have been tightening a lot recently. So I don't know if you've
Oh,
seen
yeah.
that he got in trouble for reaching out to what's his name, Ryan Miller, the former GC of FTX. So he got in trouble for that, and then soon after got in trouble for using a VPN to allegedly watch the Super Bowl. So his bail conditions have been tightening a lot. So he already wasn't having a great time, but now he's under the impression that he's no longer going to be able to use Twitter, Substack, and he's no longer going to be able to play League of Legends. So we all know how much Sam loves his League of Legends. So he's having a rough time right
Yeah.
now. So those new conditions haven't
I'm,
been imposed yet, but he said that he's sort of trying to transition into not using those things since he assumes that he's not going to be able to anymore. So I think he's feeling the loss of the no League of Legends.
oh, right. Oh, I didn't realize that. So that takes a while, because I remember reading about that and this business with the VPN, and that was one of the things that came into my mind. It was like, what does this mean for League of Legends? But
Right.
that
It doesn't
that
say
takes time
anything
to be
specifically.
implemented.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything specifically in the letter. It just whitelists some websites that he is able to use, and it doesn't say anything about League of Legends. But Sam basically told me that he's under the impression that they want to, I guess, blacklist any websites that have any sort of DM feature because they don't want him to be like sending messages that they can't track. So he said that apparently League of Legends has some sort of messaging feature. I don't play League of Legends, but he
Oh,
said that. So he says that he's under the impression that he won't be able to play it because of the messaging feature. So I don't think that's been like reported on or anything, but it seems that that's his impression. And so those bail conditions aren't yet in place, and they haven't even been approved by the judge. This was just a letter from the government to the judge, But if they do go into place, I think he's going to have a rough next few months.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the wheels of justice turn slowly, don't they? But
Yes, yes,
I mean, yeah, I guess leaving aside sort of any leaving aside the question of criminality, because I think, obviously, Sam is kind of public enemy number one in crypto, and I think for good reason at the moment. But we have to, we have to sort of stick with the principle of innocent until proven guilty, don't we? But
yeah,
I mean, leaving aside sort of this idea of criminality, does he have sort of did you get a sense that he was aware and regretted like the damage that he'd caused? I mean, as I say, like not necessarily through criminal actions, but like the fact that FTX blew up, it took
yeah.
so many people's money. Is there any sense that he is feeling that in any way?
Right. Like he certainly never has said anything about he's never made some admission of guilt in terms of criminality, and he's never yeah, he maintains that there was no like malicious intent. But he has expressed that like, and he talks very quantitatively, like he talks about things in numbers. So he's said multiple times like the fact that he's done net harm on the world really weighs tremendously on him. And he has like there have been moments where I do feel he is being genuinely remorseful. And there's other moments in which like I feel like he's giving me a bit of a PR sort of apology to people. But there have been moments where I feel like I've seen him sort of seeming like he's kind of breaking down and feeling sorry for people. But I feel like he's overall not as emotional a person as most people are. Like he's told me that he's not a super emotional person. Like he doesn't really feel ultra high highs or low lows. So I haven't seen him like broken down in tears ever or anything like that. But he has expressed remorse. Like it's funny because I remember on my very first phone call with him, when he picked up the phone, I remember being sort of off put because he didn't sound too affected. Like he didn't sound like he was shattered or near tears, which I would expect for someone whose company just collapsed and everything like that. He kind of picked up the phone and just said like, "Hey, it's Sam," and I asked how he's doing, and he was like, "Well, it hasn't been my best day." Like I was kind of like I thought that was really odd, but the more and more I've talked to him, I just do think he's very unemotional of a person, and I don't know if that is just something psychological deeper over there, but yeah, he's maintained sort of general composure throughout it all. So I have been a little bit surprised that I haven't seen him have like complete mental breakdowns, because I feel like that's what I would be feeling in those positions. But he's definitely expressed remorse, like with like verbally expressed it and everything like that. And I don't know, pain over what's happened to customers. But actually, when we talk, he talks more in depth and more at length about the effect it's had on employees or any people who supported him along the way, and how those people have gotten burned. So people who, I don't know, really like stood by his side the entire way, and those people are getting burned. He's expressed, I think, almost more remorse over those people, as well as the effective altruism community. He's expressed that as well. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's effective altruism has suffered a PR disaster, hasn't it,
yeah,
as a result of him? And yeah, I guess that's a group of people, like FTX employees. Obviously, you mentioned some of them earlier, and some of them are facing charges of their own. But I mean, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people who worked for FTX who did so in good faith, who had
totally,
no idea what was
totally.
going on.
Yeah,
And yeah, I mean, the effects on them must have been pretty devastating. So,
yeah,
and I guess from Sam's point of view, these were people that he probably could put a name and a face to in
yeah.
many respects. So
I think
I
that's
guess,
yeah. Like I think he's aware that obviously so many customers were harmed, but I think that like him having a personal relationship with a lot of the employees and them really believing in the company and standing by the company, I think he feels really guilty about that.
and I remember you put out a video a few days ago, Tiffany. I think maybe this was the one where you just got back from ETH Denver, and you were a little husky, but
Yeah.
you were. you were talking about it seemed like a lot of fun.
It was a lot of
You were
fun.
talking about the fact that he was facing, I think it was 4 new charges,
Yes.
which brings it to kind of 12 in total.
Right.
Um, and the fact that he was now looking at, assuming that it was guilty on all counts, around about, I think it was 155 years in prison
Yeah.
or
So, I
something like
mean,
that.
the original number with the 8 counts, he was facing 115 years in prison. And then those 4 additional charges apparently might add 40 additional years in prison, according to CNBC, if he's charged with all. So, I mean, I don't know if there's overlap on those charges, but I mean, just doing the basic math, I was like, okay, so maybe 155 years in prison, which if you got 115 or 100, I don't know, 45, 55, wouldn't be too big a difference, I guess, anyway, since that's all pretty much life.
Yeah, I mean, even once you start getting close to 3 figures, it's
Yeah.
kind of academic,
Yeah.
isn't it?
He's even said that, like, even if he were to get something like 30 or 40 or so years, he said that, like, he would kind of consider that to be basically life as well. I mean, because he'd be an I don't know, sort of in old age by the time he got out. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That was going to sort of make up the basis of my next question, really, because I'm interested to know, whether he kind of talks about prison much, whether this is something that comes up. I mean, I can imagine for him it's not a subject that he wants to dwell on, but it's
yeah.
it's kind of the 800-pound gorilla sitting in the corner of the room, isn't it? So yeah, have you guys kind of discussed that much? Has he
Yeah.
has he sort of, given any insight into his state of mind regarding that?
So I've pried about prison multiple times, and his answer is generally that he doesn't think it's productive to be ruminating on thoughts about prison. Like I ask him, does it feel like a real reality though? Like you know that this is a possibility, and he's like, I do know it's a possibility. But he says that he doesn't want to dwell on it because he doesn't think it's productive. He's also said that, like, if he just resigns himself to thinking that he is going to go to prison for life, then he thinks that there would be no shot at him maybe being found innocent, or maybe, I guess, winning or being successful at trial. So it seems like he wants to, like, cling on to any sort of optimism and not dwell too much on thoughts of prison for life. But he says he realizes it's a possibility. But we have spoken about his time at Fox Hill Prison because he spent about 8 days in prison in the Bahamas. So I think that kind of sheds light into how he might fare in prison if he was put in there for quite a long time. And at Fox Hill Prison, he said that he basically was. He used the words like going mad. Like he said, and he was only there for 8 days, and he said that he basically went mad
Mm.
there because, I mean, Sam's someone who I've noticed during, like, I don't know, when I visited him a few times, like he's constantly doing something. He's constantly playing League of Legends while also like spinning a fidget spinner, and like he constantly has to have his mind busy or has to be doing something or doing something tactile while doing something mental. So I think that just the thought of him in a room with nothing to do, I am honestly kind of scared for him because I don't know how he would deal with that because he's constantly doing something or thinking a lot or whatever. So he said that he went pretty much mad in Fox Hill Prison. He said that he spent days doing, like, I think he said 18 hours a day of Sudoku, which I'm sure is an exaggeration, but I think he got like one Sudoku book and would just spend a lot of time playing Sudoku. And then he said he tried to go comatose throughout a lot of it, like just trying to just sort of knock out and not be conscious. So I don't know. It's paints a pretty dark picture of what his life would be like if he was sentenced to like a life in prison. Because in 8 days,
Yeah.
he said he was going pretty nuts.
I think people tend to focus a lot, don't they, on the fact that prison is. I mean, there are many, many reasons, I'm sure, why prison isn't a good place to be. But people, tend to focus on the fact that you're locked up with psychopaths and murderers, and people who are not deemed fit to mix in wider society. But
Yeah.
I guess there's also that element of, yeah, just sheer boredom. Like you don't have League of Legends, you don't have a laptop that you can be doing
Mhm.
whatever the hell Sam Bankman-Fried does on a laptop. Like it's kind of, and maybe that is the real sort of, the real kind of thing to be scared of. Did
Yeah.
he say? Because I mean, I remember reading about Fox Hill in the media, and how it's not exactly the nicest accommodation in the
Yeah.
Bahamas. Did he ever sort of admit to being scared there, or was it more sort of just boredom?
He said I asked him if he was scared about violence or anything, and he was like, honestly, like, yeah, I'm aware that that's a possibility, but like it's low on my list of priorities because he's mostly focused on like the boredom and the lack of like sort of mental stimulation. I remember him saying that like he had taken for granted his ability prior to being able to put his thoughts into words that other people could listen to. Because I guess you're sort of just kind of trapped in a box and you're not able to get your thoughts out there. And I guess obviously we've seen that as soon as he got out of prison, he made a Substack. He started tweeting again. So I mean, I guess you can see how much like how many of his thoughts were just being pent up in prison, and he wasn't able to get that out into the public. Um, but yeah, he talked about the conditions in prison, and he said that the physical conditions were. He said the words disgusting, but he was like, that's something that I can get used to though. He was like mostly struggled with the mental stimulation, but he was in the medical ward, I believe, so he wasn't with like the general prison population. So he said that he heard that other prisoners had to like poop in bags, so he had a toilet, so he didn't have to poop in a bag. So that's something. But so yeah, we spoke
Thank
about
heavens for small mercies, I guess. Yeah, yeah. And has he? I mean, one of the things that really kind of struck me in the weeks following, and especially when he went on his kind of media tour and was just kind of, I guess, running his mouth for want of a better phrase. This idea that obviously you mentioned one of his big regrets was filing for Chapter 11. Is he? Is there still a sense, do you get from him? Does he still feel that if they would only let him back into the systems, if they would only kind of, give him his passwords back, that this whole thing could be resolved? Does he still feel, to use his phrase, that
that.
customers could be made whole again?
Honestly, yeah, it does seem that way. Although when he said it, he's said like, I'm aware that I can't be the one to do it. Like he's aware that Chapter 11 team wants nothing to do with him. But he has said that like if only FTX could turn back on. He maintains that he believes FTX US is 100% solvent and that all customers could be paid back, which is it is questionable. I mean, because especially in the superseding indictment, that indictment specifically talked about the fact that apparently $45 million were moved from Alameda to FTX in order to make it solvent. I mean, Sam has disputed that claim, but I don't know. That's the claim in the superseding indictment. So Sam has said that, like, sort of, if only we could reopen, then he says that FTX US customers could be made whole. And he also has said that he believes all spot customers on FTX International could be made whole. So he believes there's enough funding to make them whole. But I mean, I guess to me, it doesn't seem that there was much segregation of funds between the spot customers and the margin customers. Obviously, I'm not there to prove that, but it just sounds like there wasn't really segregation. So, but he does maintain he believes spot customers could be made whole based on what he believes is left in FTX International. So he is kind of still clinging to that. And he is also maintaining, because in one of my interviews with Sam, he claimed that 8 minutes after Chapter 11 was filed, that $8 billion of funding came in. That's something he claimed in one of my interviews. And he
Yeah.
still continues to, he still kind of stands by that. Like, he has said that, like, obviously, there was $8 billion of interest in, like, providing funding, but obviously I don't think that anything was completely secured. So it's questionable whether or not that really would have happened. But he still has, like, mentioned that a lot of funding apparently came in really soon after Chapter 11.
I
Apparently.
guess I guess that's something, it's impossible to know, isn't it? But I,
Yeah.
I wonder whether that's something that he kind of clings to in order to make himself feel better, which,
I wonder that too. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I hesitate to make excuses for him, but I mean, I guess that's something, if I was in his position, it would be like you would want to clutch at straws like that and convince
Yeah.
yourself that you weren't
I
responsible.
think
Again, like, even,
I think so.
yeah.
Like, yeah, a lot. I always, it is hard for me to sort through, like, what things he's being honest about, what things he's being honest with himself about. Like, obviously, neither of us have the actual, like, real data and information. So I can't really, like, disprove things. When he's telling me something.
Yeah.
I can't say, like, I know this is false because of this. But I'm certainly, like, skeptical of a lot of his statements. And I know that he's probably more optimistic than most people are about the prospects of FTX reopening, et cetera. But yeah, I think he is sort of clinging to things, and I can't say if $8 billion really did or didn't come, but he does seem to cling to those things, like, and those regrets about filing for Chapter 11.
And in terms of regrets, I mean, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but FTX itself, again, something that's come out, and this this came out particularly in the bankruptcy hearing and things like that. Just the utter state of chaos that was behind the scenes. For instance, what was it? People them using QuickBooks to do their accounting, and all this kind of stuff. That
Yeah.
it was just, I mean, it was almost like fiction, wasn't it?
Right.
It was just crazy what a mess it all was. Has
Totally.
he sort of made any sort of sign that he wishes, that no, maybe that's not my question. I guess, was there ever a point, and again, leaving aside any question of criminality, was there ever a point during, leading up to almost like November last year, that he said to himself, like, wow, this is a bit of a mess. I should probably try and sort this all out a bit. Like,
Right.
everything's here. We've got a spreadsheet here labeled fiat. We've got this, we got that. We're using QuickBooks. Like,
Yeah.
has he ever said anything like that? Was there ever a point where he thought to himself, I should probably try and clear this up a little bit?
Right. Like, he's never used the words like, well, okay, you know what? He has said things about, things being sloppy and him wishing that things weren't as sloppy. So I guess he has used words like that, like that he thought that some things were done sloppily. Um, he expressed that, like, oh, I wish that I'd found out about or sorted out what fiat at was sooner. I mean, obviously, I don't know how much he really knew at what given times, but he's stated that he's like, I wish that I figured out what fiat was all about sooner. He's said that he's largely expressed that he regrets not having a chief, like, risk officer sort of person. Like, he said that there was no one solely in charge of managing risk, which is shocking. Um, but I don't know, like, in terms of, like, he's never mentioned anything about QuickBooks or anything like that. So in terms of the sloppiness there, he hasn't mentioned those things, but he's said that some things were sloppy in general.
And going back to what you said, you mentioned earlier, obviously, Nishad, I think, was the latest one of the kind of inner circle, the penthouse group, if you like.
Yeah.
Nishad was the latest one to kind of turn on him and turn witness. Obviously, I think Gary Wang was the first, and Caroline was
Right.
the
Yeah.
was the kind of big
Yeah.
star.
Mhm.
Has he talked about them much? Does he, obviously, there was this business of him allegedly trying to contact Ryan Miller, but I mean, does he talk much about that group, about those people particularly close to him, and their role in it, and what he would perhaps say to them if he could speak to them?
Yeah. He hasn't really talked too much in depth about them. I feel like he's generally been, like, reluctant to talk about other people too in depth. But he did say that, like, I asked, like, if he was aware that they were going to be cooperating. He was like, yeah, pretty soon after, like, Chapter 11 was filed. He said that, like, some of them weren't responding to his texts, so that he sort of had the inkling that they were, I don't know, potentially cooperating. So I mean, that's most of the extent of what he's said about, like, Gary and Nishad. Um, like, he's mentioned that he and Caroline had dated and stuff like that. So he's briefly mentioned stuff with Caroline, but he hasn't said anything really in depth about, Nishad or Gary. But I've asked him, like, things like, "Do you feel like you were betrayed?" And he actually responded to that with, like, he seems like quite media trained, because he was like, I feel he said that when he's asked that question, apparently he's been asked that question quite a bit. He said that he felt like it was sort of like a trick question, because he said that if he were to express that he felt betrayed, then it would sort of insinuate that they all had some sort of pact or some sort of truce that they had sort of betrayed him on. So it seems like he sort of thought through his answer there. So, but he said that, like, of course there's, like, a level of me feeling a little bit betrayed, because they were his friends. So that's mostly the extent to which he's talked about it. But yeah.
And what's the atmosphere like in the house? Because obviously he's staying with his parents. I mean, have you chatted much with Ma and Pa Bankman-Fried? Have you got sort of a sense from them of what their feelings about it all are?
I haven't had any full conversations with either of them. Like we usually talk in his. There's like a room that I guess is an office or a library, lots of books and laptop and computer and everything. So like the Joe Bankman has popped his head in like once, but I haven't had a full conversation with him. And I think I've like heard the mom's voice around the house, but I haven't spoken with her really. But I've asked Sam about it, and he's basically just been like, "Yeah, they're. It's obviously been really hard on them." But I think they're just being supportive. But he hasn't gone too much in depth about his parents, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess obviously there are questions, how much his parents knew and how much they were involved. And again, I guess that's really a matter for courts to decide. But I mean, there is still this, I guess, when anything like this happens, when someone gets caught up in a situation like this, either of their own fault or not. But there's always that kind of collateral damage. Your families are kind of dragged into it and stuff. And yeah,
Mm,
that must be something that's weighing on his mind a lot. The fact that
yeah,
so
that
many
is
more
something.
people, it goes so much further.
He's actually used those specific words. He's said that like a lot of this that he feels bad about is just the collateral damage around him, like all the people around him. So yeah, he certainly seems to be struggling with that.
I'm fascinated to know as well. Like, I think we might have discussed this in DMs, kind of prior to us having this chat. But obviously, like, not long before all this happened, um, Sam was one of the biggest figures in crypto. I mean, I think he's always been a kind of divisive figure. And then, like, shortly before FTX went down, he proposed these regulations, which really did not go down well. And there
Right.
was that brilliant debate with Eric Voorhees on Bankless, where Eric kind of destroyed him. I felt, but leaving all that aside, Sam was a big figure in
Yeah.
crypto, and um, and I guess a hero to many, or someone that many people respected for
Yeah.
for what it seemed like he'd achieved. Is there does he I mean, firstly, is there a sense, is he kind of keenly aware of how far his stock has fallen? Does he talk about that at all? How he's gone from, I guess, if you want to put it simply, hero to zero?
Right. He's definitely aware. I mean, like um, even when he posts things, like I spoke with him the day before he launched his Substack page, and I was like, I assume that people are going to tell you to shut up and are probably going to tell you that you're a liar. And he was like, oh yeah, I know, I'm aware. Like he's very well aware that people don't believe what he's saying. People want him to go f off. Like he's aware of those things. So I think he's aware that he's got pretty much everyone hates him. I think he's even said those words, like that he's aware that everyone hates him. um, and he's he's said that he doesn't feel like an innate need to be liked. I mean, it comes off that way. Like the amount that he wants to talk and like be in the media, it feels like he just wants attention and wants to be liked. But when I ask him about that, he says that he doesn't. He says he doesn't feel an innate need to be liked. He just says that like it was nice having, I guess, people like him and support him back in the day because that meant that it flowed into how successful the company was. And then he always goes back to the effective altruism stuff. He's like, and the success in the company meant that I was able to make more money that I could donate to charity, etc. So I mean, he certainly recognizes how far he's fallen, but he says that he doesn't mind people hating him in itself. He just says that like he's worried about the fact that it's effective altruism and his ability to donate money. Allegedly, obviously,
Mm.
like I'm sure that most people are skeptical of everything he says, but that's sort of what he's said about that. But yeah, he's certainly not doing well. I mean, in our last conversation, like he even mentioned that like sometimes even watching certain TV shows is sort of triggering to him because it reminds him of back when things were like better and everything in his life. So
Mhm.
he's certainly aware of how far he's fallen and he's not doing too well.
Yeah. Do you think he misses? Does he strike you as one of those people? Obviously, you say that he's kind of always doing stuff, and it reminds me of that thing when he was supposedly pitching to VCs and playing League of Legends at the same time, and how
Yeah.
that wasn't a red flag in retrospect.
Yeah.
But do, does he kind of do you think he kind of misses the work aspect of it? I mean, he struck me. I never met the guy, but from reading about him and hearing about him, he struck me as the sort of guy who was kind of a workaholic. And I think
Totally.
for if you want to run an exchange, a crypto exchange, that that's kind of the first one of the first requirements. But
Totally.
yeah, does he miss working? Do you think he just would
Yeah.
love to just get back behind a laptop and do
That's
whatever
actually
he did?
Yeah, I actually completely do get that sense. Like, I feel like he always has to be working on something. I feel like he is just someone who doesn't do well just sitting with his hands tied, which is, I
Yeah.
think, honestly, part of why, like, we see the Substack coming out. I feel like he's not okay with just sitting there doing nothing. Like, he has to feel like he's doing something productive. Those aren't his words. That's just my observation. Because, I mean, most people would say he shouldn't be talking at all. He shouldn't be Substacking at all, but I feel like he wants
Mm.
to feel like he's doing something proactive. So he was like writing out like several pages. Like I think he when I visited him, one of the times he scrolled through a document that was like I think like over 100 pages of his writing. Like I think he just needs to be working on
Wow.
things. So I think that he probably does miss the work aspect of it. He just seems like he has a really like busy mind and needs to be doing things all the time.
Yeah, I can understand that really. It kind of it figures, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there's just a couple of other things I wanted to ask you about, Tiffany, and I mean, I guess it kind of going back. We touched on this idea of his standing in the crypto community. I'm fascinated to know, has he been kind of keeping up with developments in the crypto space? Obviously, FTX is has been the big story in town, but this being crypto, it moves pretty quickly. We're on to a new crisis now. Has he said anything to you? Has he given any kind of opinions or insights onto what he's seeing in crypto at the moment, or do you think he's very much kind of focused on his own particular
Yeah, you know
crisis,
what?
as it were?
Actually, he hasn't really been because I think that I spoke with him about yeah, I spoke with him on Saturday and I brought up like SVB, which I guess isn't really crypto, but he seemed like he was like he I think he asked me he was like, oh, is SVB an actual bank? He asked me something like that, so it sounds like he's not really keeping tabs on everything, but it might go back to what he was saying in terms of like the fact that he can't watch certain shows because it sort of reminds him of things. I wonder if maybe that could be part of the reason why, but it doesn't sound to me like he's keeping up with a lot of the news, or at least he hasn't brought things up to me when we've chatted. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is sort of funny because I would expect him to be up to date with everything, but he hasn't brought things up
I
really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if he does try and keep up with crypto news, it doesn't take very long before it kind of leads back to FTX and Alameda, which is, as you sort of as you suggested, would probably kind of trigger him a little bit.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it just gives us a sense of what a massive hole FTX and Alameda has kind of blown in the industry, if you like.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's fascinating. It's so interesting to get this, to get this kind of slant on what's going on, to get this insight. The only
yeah.
other question I have is, has he ever explained to you, has he ever given any sense of what that tweet thread, what
The
happened?
one what?
Has he ever tried to
Oh
explain that? Because I remember seeing that in real time and just thinking like, either I'm imagining things and we're living in simulation or whatever it
oh
is,
yeah,
or this guy is trolling us
oh
and
yeah.
literally does
I was
not care.
actually terrified.
Has
Like
he talked about that?
yeah. Oh, I asked him about that. Yeah. Well, because I remember seeing that and I was actually terrified. I was like, this guy is nuts. Like I don't know. I was so like I thought that was so weird. But I asked him about that on our first phone call. Actually, I asked him about that.
Mm,
And I don't even think I included that audio because I mean his answer was sort of frivolous and it's been talking about Sam in general has been difficult because I feel like if I relay any information that doesn't feel like I'm asking him just hard questions, and people kind of get mad at me. So his answer to that was sort of silly. So I didn't include it because I didn't want people to attack me or anything. But he just said that he said that PR couldn't get any worse for him at the time, and he just wanted to shake up people's frame of mind. Like it's a really odd answer to me. I'm like, I was like, Sam, it felt like trolling when I read it. And he was like, oh yeah. He was like, looking back, I regret it. It did feel like trolling. But he was like, at the time, just the PR couldn't get worse. And I just wanted to put something out there that would make people just reframe and shake up their frame of mind. And I was just like, that's such a strange excuse. Because to me, I was like, that Twitter thread, like, would terrify me if I had all of my money in FTX and this guy's just posting like one what? Because I don't have money in FTX, but I remember seeing that and being like, oh my God, this guy just ran off with everyone's money.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had a really odd excuse about that, just him wanting to shake things up.
I mean, he certainly achieved that aim, didn't he? I mean, I think
Yeah.
crypto Twitter just went into absolute meltdown, I think, because yeah,
Oh,
it did feel like trolling. I mean,
it did.
there wasn't it just like this guy either is in, doesn't really appreciate the situation, or he's laughing at us. It seemed
Totally.
to be one of those two.
That's how it felt to me too. I mean, and he maintained that he didn't mean it to come off as trolling, and he just wanted to like explain his side and shake things up or whatever. But I remember feeling that way too. And but he did say that he regrets it, and he did admit that it came off as trolling and that he's aware of that now. But I thought that
Mm.
was in poor taste too.
Yeah. Wow, it's such a fascinating insight that you've got there, Tiffany. And I mean, this must have been how's the experience been for you? I mean, you've been going to speak to this guy who, as we've discussed, is, one of the most, I guess, notorious people, not just in
Mhm.
crypto, but I guess in, the world at the moment.
Totally,
Like, he's such a vilified figure, and with
totally.
good reason, obviously. But how's it felt for you, going to chat with this guy, and obviously, getting this insight, and sharing it with the community. What's the experience been like?
It's honestly been difficult because I wasn't a professional journalist before any of this, so I'm not used to talking to people like this in the first place or having to break any sort of news to an audience. So I'm very new to all of this. Like I just got thrown into this mess. And obviously Sam is one of the most controversial figures in all of crypto and all, I don't know, the entire world right now, probably. So saying anything related to him becomes very inflammatory very quickly. So I've been sort of struggling with how to relay information and what to do with information because obviously in some ways if I just relay his answer to a question, sometimes I get attacked for being his mouthpiece when in reality I'm kind of like I don't know if I have access to information, I figure I might as well try to relay that to the public and obviously he could be lying and everyone's welcome to be skeptical of all of his statements but like you should be able to decide that on your own and use your brain and come to your own conclusions. So it's been difficult to relay information because it's easy to get attacked and for a lot of conspiracy theories to form and everything like that. Which is why I was like interested in talking to you about it because I don't know, it's sometimes easier to talk to someone else about it than for me to just post whatever Sam says on my own platforms and then get attacked for being his mouthpiece or platforming him as a criminal or whatever. So it's been
Yeah.
difficult actually.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you talking to me about it, Tiffany, because yeah, I kind of it's a great service that you've been doing, kind of reporting this, and getting this insight for us.
It is interesting just because it's strange for me to be in this position and I understand how like there's a lot of conspiracy theories around it because I'm like I find it strange too. Obviously Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal and everyone wants to talk to Sam and it has been shocking to me the whole time that he's gave me one of the first interviews on the phone and is letting me I guess interview him at home and everything like that. So I think it's strange too, like just like everyone else, I think it's strange. But I think that like if I have some sort of unique access to like be able to ask someone questions directly when I feel like every day I'm reading the news on FTX. So if something comes up and I'm able to ask the person that was at the helm of it questions directly, I'm kind of like I don't want to pass up the opportunity to ask the questions. So like I'm trying to get the information and figure out what to do with it all.
Absolutely. I mean, opportunity comes. You have to seize it with both hands, don't you? You have to,
Yeah.
take these opportunities when they come. Well,
Totally.
yeah, Tiffany. I mean, thanks again for firstly, thanks for for talking to Sam like this, and for getting this information for us, and for sharing it with me and our audience today. I really appreciate it. It's been so interesting talking to you. And I mean, firstly, what's next for you? What's in the future?
I honestly, like, I haven't had a plan this entire time. I guess that's a question I've gotten a couple of times, but I got thrown into all of this without a plan, and I got thrown into the content creation and wasn't planning on doing anything journalistic. And then I feel like those things kind of fell into my lap, and then now I have this access to Sam. So I'm a bit like I feel a bit out of my depth really in terms of what to do next. So I'm struggling with that question as well. I'm trying to figure that out too.
I mean, I'm sure it will become apparent. I mean, crypto is just so, there's so many narratives going on at the
Yeah,
moment. I guess, it will crypto, I think, has a way of kind of deciding your future for you. I certainly feel that.
true.
So,
I'm just letting it all take
yeah.
me, just going wherever it takes me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Tiffany, please do, please keep up the good work. Please keep reporting. Please keep, telling it as you see it, because I think your point of view is not only really unique, but it's a really refreshing insight as well. And, your story about how you came to be in this position and in this industry is really fascinating. And I think you're doing wonderful work. So please do keep it up. And I hope we can do this again sometime soon. And maybe, I guess there'll probably be more to talk about regarding Sam and Celsius and whatever meltdown crypto is having at that particular time. Um,
Totally.
but
Happy
yeah,
to chat
thanks again for
anytime.
talking. Yeah, it's been great. Thanks again. And Tiffany, for those watching, where can people follow you?
Okay, I have a YouTube channel on here. I believe my channel is just at Tiffany Fong. Hopefully, it'll be like linked or
Mhm.
something like that. And then I
Great.
use Twitter, which is Tiffany Fong, TiffanyFong, with one underscore. What else? I have Substack. I have
Oh, yeah.
I have all of the things. So I mean, but if you find me on YouTube or Twitter, then you'll find the rest probably.
Fantastic. Well, yes, we will leave links to all of Tiffany's all the places you can follow Tiffany. There will be links in the description. And if you're not following Tiffany already, I highly recommend you do, because as you will have seen from listening to this interview, she is doing a wonderful job. She has some amazing insights, and I think there's going to be lots more to come. So, Tiffany, thanks again for joining me today. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this again sometime.
I'd love to. And thank you for having me on the show. You're an absolute legend. I really respect you, and thank you.
Oh, thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to follow Tiffany as well. I'll see you again soon.